Good evening, everyone. Good evening. Good evening. Today is August 24th, 2023. And this is a special session of your unified government of Wyandotte County, Kansas City, Kansas, where your elected body will be going over a budget workshop. Before I call this meeting to order, I want to announce that we have individuals participating remotely as well as on site. All participants joining by phone should please mute their phones when not speaking to avoid any background noise. During the meeting, please make sure that you announce yourself by name and title every time you speak, so the public that is participating knows exactly who is speaking. This is critical given the number of remote participants and its current guidance from the Kansas Attorney General's office. Also, please make sure that when you speak, that you are speaking clearly and that you're speaking directly into the microphone at an audible level to where everyone can hear you, to ensure that your comments are not only heard, but there is an accurate record for the clerk. I will now call this meeting to order. Clerk, roll call, please.
Thank you, Mayor, and good evening. You're hereby notified that I've called a special session of the Unified Government of Wyandotte County in Kansas City, Kansas to be conducted in a hybrid format on Thursday, August 24th, 2023 at 5 p.m. in the 5th floor conference room of the Municipal Office Building for a budget workshop. Roll call. Markley. Stites.
Here.
Bynum.
Here.
Burrows.
Here.
Townsend.
Here.
McKiernan.
Here.
Ramirez.
Here.
Johnson.
Here.
Kane. Garner.
Here. Thank you, clerk. Again, this evening is a scheduled budget workshop. And I'll turn it over to our county administrator, Mr. David Johnson, for opening remarks and to lead the presentation.
Thank you, Mayor. This is a continuation of our discussion of last week. At the end of last week, we received a question from, I believe it was Representative Davis, and about personnel. And we're going to start off, as we did last week, by answering the questions that the commission asked us to come back with. So Renee has a short explanation, hopefully provides the information that Commissioner Davis has requested. And I think you'll find it a little bit enlightening yourselves. So Renee.
Thank you, David. Renee Ramirez, Director of Human Resources. Good evening, Commission. This evening, I have with me Shakiva Christian, HR Manager, and I also have several of the HR staff members here that work on recruiting and helping departments fill positions. This first slide that we're going to show you is an overall picture of the vacancies throughout the unified government, and these are actual positions that are vacant. The vacancies listed in this graph are actual positions and not FTE count. So when we're looking at a position, we're looking at one body per position, regardless of the number of hours that they work at the unified government. So this is going to be a combination of full-time, part-time, seasonal, sworn, and civilian. So this illustration here will give you, represents the vacancies across the organization, representing years 2020, 2021, 2022, and where we sit currently with our vacancies. This next slide is the longstanding vacant positions that we've had here at the unified government. These vacancies would represent positions that we had as a result of a hiring slowdown, which we had in 2020, 2021, and a hiring freeze in early part of 2022. Currently, as we sit here today, the unified government has 394 FTEs as of August of 2023 that are sitting vacant. The administrator has asked us to actually work with departments to really vet out why are some of these long-standing vacancies still sitting on the books for us today. So departments were tasked to look at their position inventory reports that we actually analyze every year as we're going through the budget process, and we work very closely with the budget team in trying to balance the position inventory for the unified government. We did ask departments to try to identify which positions are still in need if they've been sitting vacant. Through that process, originally, we had looked at 12 vacancies that were actually eliminated. However, we took a second look at that and working with our assistant county administrators, we were able to eliminate an additional four positions, which brought the total to 16 vacant positions that were eliminated from our position inventory. There are 17 positions, though, that were identified through working with our departments that were identified as necessary for department operations. So these were all hard position inventory numbers that were sitting vacant for a while, and departments came back and justified the need as to keeping those positions there sitting on the inventory. There are various reasons why departments justified some of these reasons. Some of these I've listed, the hiring slowdowns, the hiring freeze, uncertainties of grant funding for some of these positions, the challenges that came as a result of the pandemic, and then challenges that we have with recruiting. Some of those challenges with recruiting are low applicant pools because, as organizations, businesses across the nation are looking for applicants to apply for their jobs. The residency requirement and compensation challenges, as we're looking at and trying to recruit talent to the organization, we have to be cognizant that we actually, we have competitors out there. We're all vying for the same pool of candidates. So there are organizations and companies out there that will actually offer more money to their candidates for lesser responsibilities than what some of our employees are holding here today at the unified government. So those are things that potentially challenge us as we're recruiting and trying to fill positions. But at any rate, the HR team will continue to evaluate vacancies, working with our administrator, working with the budget team to really see, what the need is for the organization and what the budget availability is for maintaining some of these positions. This next graph represents a pie chart that will show you the filled versus vacant positions by FTE. And as you can see here, the FTE, I have a little key down there, full-time, of course, is going to be one equivalent. We have two forms of part-time. We have part-time with benefits, which would account for 0.75. We have part-time individuals that do not get benefits, and they're at 0.50. And then we have seasonal temps that we would calculate at a quarter. Right now, the unified government, again, is sitting at 394 FTE, which represents about 16% of vacancy rate for our organization. We are operating at 84% capacity. We have 84% of our positions that are actually filled today. And again, this is a combination of union, non-union across all departments here in the organization. The next slide that we have here is the vacancy percentage for some of our larger UG departments. And we pulled out about four of our largest departments here at the unified government and demonstrated what the vacancy rate and our operating capacity is across these larger departments for the unified government. The first you'll see there is the police department. They're operating at 87.77% capacity. And then they have about a 12% vacancy rate. With that, again, this is a combination of sworn positions and civilian positions. For public works, again, you'll see their vacancy rate is sitting at like 19% with the 80%, 80.25% capacity where they have those positions filled. The sheriff's office, you're going to see that department has one of the highest vacancy rates and one of the lowest filled rates for their employee base. We have tried to be strategic in trying to get some of those positions filled by having adjustments to their salaries. They are one of the positions where we actually have an exception to the residency requirement, where their employees are allowed to have a 24-month period to move into the county, opposed to a 12-month period to move into the county. So we continue to have challenges with the sheriff's office. This does also include the juvenile detention center, where we have statutorial ratios for one employee per the number of residents that we have. So those are things that we continue to look at and try to strategize on how we're going to get those positions filled. And then the last representation there is the fire department, where you're seeing they're operating at about 96, almost 97% full capacity with very few vacancies in those areas. And again, that's a combination of sworn and civilian positions. The HR department is always watching the UG turnover rates. You know, we're wanting to see, you know, what our turnover is here organization wide, why are our employees leaving? So here's a trend analysis of the UG turnover rates. In 2020, we had a turnover rate of 8.61. Well, that's pretty typical across organizations because, COVID was there. People were not moving to other jobs. Everybody was kind of staying in place because of the unknown. Then we move into 2021, where you're seeing the spike in turnover, where 15.26 percentage was our turnover. Some factors in that higher turnover is, remember, unemployment. A lot of people were going on unemployment. A lot of people, there are some individuals that actually were making more money on unemployment than actually being employed. So people were looking at the work-life balance at that point, coming out of COVID, trying to figure out what we need to do in those situations. So you started to see a trend up. But at any rate, the national average for the turnover rates, we were still trending pretty good because national average at that time was right around 15%. Then going into 2022, you're seeing we're falling down now on the turnover. So we're starting to see less people leave the organization. And then where we're sitting at today, we did a projection of what we are thinking based on what the industry is looking at for the turnover. So as we look through our research and relying on a source that human resources professionals always rely on, which is the Society of for Human Resources Management, they are projecting that the end of 2023, we will have a nation turnover rate of about 18%. So if we're lucky, hopefully, we'll be right about the 10%, but hopefully no more than the 12%. That is just a projection that we're hoping for at this time. This next chart is going to show you information over a 4-year period. So we looked at the separations, and as you can see in 2020, 2021, 2022, and 2023. In 2020, we had less separations, which again, as I mentioned, people were kind of staying in place. 2021 was a little bit higher in separations at 349 separations, and there was a lot happening in our organization. And so people were leaving. The market is an employees market where people are recruiting for jobs. Jobs are paying more money. There are work-life balances that people were taking in consideration. So you're seeing more separations that happened in 2021. In 2022, we start coming down a little bit and we're at 307. Those are straight separations, and that's going to be a combination of voluntary and involuntary separations that were occurring through our organization. And then as we sit today, 8 months into the year, we have already experienced 159 separations here at the unified government. The appointments, these are individuals coming new into our organization or individuals who may have been like rehires into our organization. So again, 2020, we had 211 new hires come to our organization. And then you'll see the number go up in 2021. In 2022, we experienced an all-time high of hiring 421 individuals. And I have to take you back into what was actually happening there. In early 2022, the interim administrator at that time had a hiring freeze, and wherein all the positions were frozen, we were not doing any hiring. And then there was a release of public safety positions that were going to be hired. And then mid-year, there was a release of over 300 positions that got released to be filled. And so a lot of those, vacancies that you're seeing now, those positions are as a result of those carryover years where these positions just sat, and then now they've gotten released. In 2023, right now, we are trending at hiring at 213. And again, that's a combination of bringing in classes, bringing in, civilian positions. So we're trending pretty good right now. And I think part of our rich benefit package that we offer here at the Unified Government is one of the things that we always encourage our hiring managers to highlight. While we may sacrifice a little bit on the starting salaries, to offer a rich benefit package, the way that we offer a benefit package to our employees is unspeakable. And a lot of organizations don't offer the things that we actually have in our benefits package. The below graph down there represents transfers. These are going to be transfers that are employees that are going from department to department, or they're going from, let's just say, a trainee position or an auxiliary officer position to a patrol officer. So these are basically internal transfers that are happening throughout our organization. We threw this slide in here. This is a slide that we often use with administration and as we're going into negotiations. And this kind of helps us really set the stage and really helps us keep on track of what have we been given the authority and what has been approved for compensation for our employees. So this graph will represent kind of over the years, the percentages that we've given employees in these respective unions. And in 2024 and 2025, if you see a space that's not there, that means that we're getting ready to actively start engaging in labor negotiations with those unions. So this was just merely thrown in there so that way you can kind of see what we're trending, how we're trending, and what we are projecting as increases for our employee base based on the agreed upon memorandum of understandings. So lastly, I want to leave you with some of the things that we really need to consider when we're considering eliminating positions and creating vacancies throughout our organization. This is part of that deep dive that we have to take when we're making these decisions. And so one of the things that we need to consider are and ask ourselves, our department's working smarter with lower staffing levels. And what is the impact of that? We need to be very cognizant of that. We also need to look at realignments of staff from one department to another based on the need, instead of creating new positions. We may have positions where maybe they're not really operating at full capacity, but we have another department within the unified government who has a greater need. So instead of creating new positions and making our inventory and raising our FTE level, let's look at what we have in here and let's see if we can shift. And if there's a possibility of shifting, we can upskill, we can retrain, we can do help individuals through that process so we can make them successful in another department. We also have to consider the turnover cost associated with separations, costs associated with vacancies and replacement and training. So those are true costs to our organization. Vacancies cost our organization. And before we're creating those vacancies, we need to make sure we're asking, if we create this vacancy later down the road, are we going to have substitute labor through using temp agencies, hiring contractors, paying employees out of grade, that are performing jobs at a higher level? These are things that we have to keep in the back of our mind. We need to see, has the department experienced an increase in overtime, an increase in comp time as a result of lower staffing levels? And then most importantly, employee morale and employee burnout due to carrying more workloads, which directly impacts employee turnover. We have to look at succession planning and what we're doing there. Succession planning is just not in executive roles for the organization. Succession planning is at all levels of the organization, and we need to be able to identify which positions are most critical for the future needs of our organization. And lastly, most importantly too, is the transfer of institutional knowledge to maintain the continuity of operations for our organization. Institutional knowledge is huge. And there are individuals here, we have institutional knowledge that's walking out of the doors every day. How do we preserve that? How do we transfer that knowledge? We just entered into a program, David agreed to do the drop program for KPNF positions through CAPERS. That gives us the ability to maintain personnel who are in the KPNF, like your police, fire, and sheriff. And they actually are retiring through CAPERS, but they're going to continue to work for the unified government, and they can elect to work 3, 4, or 5 years. That is giving us an opportunity to better manage and really project what our true vacancies are going to be in those public safety areas. So I hope this presentation answered some of the questions that you had. And if you have any questions, we're here to try to answer them for you. Thank you.
Commissioner Markling.
So what is an appropriate vacancy rate for, and in particular, I'd be curious if there's a separation between government and private sector. I mean, obviously, there's always a vacancy rate. What would be a typical vacancy rate for an organization?
Shakiva Christian, HR manager. It varies. I don't know if there's a specific standard when it comes to that. I think we need to look at the needs of the organization and what is appropriate for the workload. So I think where we stand now, 84% is still pretty lean. I think, and that may have something to do with having the authorized strength that's probably lower than maybe, for example, private sector. There may be a larger, accounting department in the private sector, whereas our accounting departments are smaller. And that, I think that's true across a lot of departments within the unified government. So I think the 84%, like I said, it's probably pretty standard, but given that we don't have the authorized strength probably that some organizations have, impacts our service levels.
Commissioner Ramirez.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a couple questions. From the 16 positions, I'm just curious, of the 16 positions that were eliminated, which were there multiple departments or were just a handful of those 16?
Renee Ramirez, Director of Human Resources. That was over 4 departments.
Thank you. I was just curious. For the four large departments showing the vacancy rate, I know last year for the 2023 budget, the sheriff came to us for a pay parity. Has that, and I'm not sure if the sheriff is here or not, but has that in any way helped with bringing in more candidates for the sheriff's department?
Today, the answer to that is it's not helped a whole lot. We still have our challenges in that. We are hoping that we're going to have a Saturday testing. So we're hoping that it draws more candidates because we're going to hold it on a Saturday. We are hoping that, at some point that those salaries will help us get individuals here, but that is a very hard to recruit position for. That is one of the positions, again, that has the 24-month residency requirement. But asking or having someone come in and the challenges that our deputies face every day working inside our facilities, that's hard to get individuals to come in and really encourage them that, this is the position, this is the career. However, we work hard with our sheriff's office. They are, we are advocates for them. We are out there beating the pavements. We started the correction specialist program where we are trying to engage our youth of the community, at the high school level, creating that program. I think we brought that to you where they're coming in, they're going to be with us for a semester, these seniors, and then hopefully when they graduate, they'll come in to our department. So We are looking at every opportunity and every available resource to help us to get there. Yes, the salary increase has helped in some ways, with the advertising and things, but we still have to do our due diligence in getting people to understand what the position really is. Because it doesn't do us any good to bring someone in and then we equip them. A cost per hire, it costs us to hire, individuals. There are a lot of things that have to be done. That's all coming out of our budget. So in order to replace somebody after you've made an investment, because that's truly what we're doing. When we're hiring individuals for the organization, we're making an investment in this person. So we're hoping that soon we will start seeing some sort of return on our investment for that decision.
Okay, and I hope so, because I know that is something Eric was very, who's a big advocate for. He came before us, and so I hope and I encourage anybody who's watching or listening, if you know someone, please encourage them to come to the sheriff's department, have a conversation with sheriff and the undersheriff and any employee of our sheriff's department, and try and encourage them to come work for department. Yes, as you said, it's not an easy job. It's difficult. Being in the type of position in the type of environment. So I'm hoping, and I know you and I know the Sheriff's Optic and his department does an amazing job of trying to recruit as best as they can. And that goes across all our departments here at the UG. I have one last question, and this is for, I believe, the administrator. Are all our unions on contract?
Believe they are. That was a thing that about a year ago was a goal of the unified government, is to bring every union under a contract. The last one, I believe, was the fire contract, and that was a retro. That's why I think Renee mentioned that they're going to be starting in about a few months to start the next cycle of a CBA. So, and then we have a couple others about ready to start now.
Our actual last contract that we came into agreement with was with the UFCW, is our police dispatchers.
That's it, yeah, the dispatch. Oh, answer is yes.
All right, thank you.
Commissioner Johnson.
Thank you, Mayor. Just on that point to Mr. Johnston. I don't know what the magic sauce is, but we haven't seemed to have as much heartburn in terms of our negotiations with the contracts as we have in the past. So I don't know if there's anything different. And that's just my perspective. Perhaps there is, but it's just the style in which we have done. So whoever's working on that, hats off to you. Cost per hire. Can you kind of give me a range? I know it differs depending on the kind of position, but can you kind of give me a range of what that actually costs us on average to hire someone? Because I do agree that it is indeed an investment.
See, I have that in this report. So typically the cost per hire, as we're calculating that, there's going to be a range for that as well. I would say anywhere, it could be from $700 to up to $2,000, for cost per hire. And that's going to be depending on how big the class is, where we've advertised, for police officer, what are the things that we have to equip them with when we're, their uniforms, the training that we give them. All of those are factors that we have to consider for the cost per hire.
Yeah, I think, again, I hear there's a discussion about return on investment that we certainly want to see. And I think that's something that we have to continue to look at as we are going through these changes. I'm glad that you all went through, took another look at it, and it sounds like you're open to taking yet another look at it. But I'll end with my final question. And when we look at the different departments, the vacancy percentages for large UG departments, um, Commissioner Ramirez had talked about the sheriff, but I sure would love to hear about how are we being so successful with the fire department? Because I would have never assumed that we would only have a 3.34% vacancy rate.
Well, I think one of the reasons is the retention, having the ability to retain firefighters. They have one of the lowest turnover rates for the organization. They're typically staying with our organization sometimes 36 years. And now with the drop program, they're able to now expand that 3, 4, 5 more years from that. And so your turnover rate is a direct correlation to the number of vacancies that are going to happen.
Thank you, Commissioner King.
You know, I've been around for a little while. And a thing that sticks out to me is employee morale and burnout. And what I don't want to do, and you know, we have had wage freezes for our employees for several years. And what I don't want to do is eliminate a job and then take that job and throw it on another group. And then they have the burnout. So I'm not sure what the magic number is, but if we're lean, maybe we shouldn't be so lean to take some work off the folks that are performing it. Because nobody wants to come in every day and do their job and somebody else's job. And that's what we've done in the past. And I damn sure don't want to freeze the wages on anybody. But I would think that we would want to go up closer to 90% so we can take the strain off our employees.
Commissioner, we appreciate that. That is why the last slide was in there, because before we talk about further eliminations, we need to have these considerations in the back of our minds. That.
Thank you, Commissioner King. I'm sorry, Commissioner Stites and Commissioner Bynum. My apologies.
Here we go. All right.
Let me change that. Honorable Commissioner Stites.
Wear a shirt that looked like that. Stites District 7. Commissioner Johnson, you asked the question, why fire at 3 and why police and sheriff's department, right? I've done not the fire department job, but I've been a police officer in a sheriff's department in Wyandotte County. And I will tell you, police and sheriff, look at the climate of today, right? How hard is it to attract somebody to come and do this job when you see nationwide what's happening, right? Fire department doesn't get attacked like police and sheriffs do, right? So the retention is there because, you know, they do a good job and they, for the most part, don't get attacked for it. But also, Renee, I wanted to address, and I know that it's a contentious point, and I worked under it for a lot of years, the residency requirement. But whenever you ask Sheriff Soptic right now, and I have, what's the single most thing that prohibits him getting that staffing number up in its residency requirement? We've already shown that the wage increase isn't working. When was the last time that the 4 that were listed, the 4 large departments, were at full staffing?
I've been here a long time and I've been in HR
too.
for a long time. And I don't know that I ever remember us being fully staffed
So maybe,
capacity.
right. And I think in a place where public service like police and sheriffs, that's not a place that we obviously, the fire department's okay because they're setting out on their numbers. But that's a place that we can't really afford to not be fully staffed or close to it. And I know that I think the number of just officers on the street for the police department is around 40 right now. I know that you had said maybe 61 or 60 or so was the number, but that was for sworn and unsworn,
That was
right?
sworn.
But so 40 officers down right now. So what I'm getting at is the residency requirement hasn't worked. It hasn't worked. Like you just said, how long have you been here and how long have the rest of us been around here for a long time? And our pool of people that we're pulling from, what other departments around, what other cities around here? There's a reason Kansas City, Missouri just lifted theirs. There's cities that surround us that see that residency requirement doesn't work. Yeah, we're still holding out and we're still showing these numbers. We got to make a change. Thanks.
Commissioner Bonner.
Thank you. A question on the vacancies, 394. And then 16 were identified as being able to be eliminated. But the remaining 378, are we still working through them or have we identified they all need to stay?
So most of them have been identified to stay. Those are positions that we've been actively recruiting. They're posted on the board. Some individuals are in background checks, some are in conditional offers. You know, there's several different stages that those positions could be in.
Okay, I just wasn't sure if the 16 was like the work wasn't done yet and we were going to have more, or that was how many total we actually identified that could be eliminated.
So the 16 positions that were there were likely positions that have been sitting on the inventory. There was no funding for them. They merely have just sat with no activity whatsoever.
Okay.
And so those are easier to eliminate. The 17 were sitting there and there was some consideration because of maybe the operational needs of the department. They couldn't do away with that specific position.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Johnson.
Thank you, Mayor. To Commissioner Stike's point, it really comes down to this body as it relates to the residency requirement. Now, I will go on the record saying that I do not want to see, I do want to continue to have a residency requirement, but I also feel the squeeze. And I don't know where we are as a commission as to whether or not, well, I see some hands going operating, where we are with regard to continuing to have that residency requirement. Because at the end of the day, it comes down to this body. So maybe I'll pull back, Mayor, and let some other persons have a say.
Okay, Commissioner Kane and Commissioner Ramirez.
Thank you, Mayor. Remember, we ran a survey and 60% of the people in the community said that if you work here, you should live here. And I'm of mind that we asked the community said what they wanted. And in my mind, they've elected us to do what they want, not necessarily what we want. And they spoke loud and clear, it was 60% that they said, and it affects my family, right? But if you have a good paying job here in Wyandotte County, and you're going to get a retirement, you're going to get all these things to go along with that. If you want a good job here, you should have to live here.
Commissioner Ramirez.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I wasn't going to touch on the presidency. I wasn't, I'm not going to. My last comment are based on the slide with considerations that you had. The very last two, I think, all of these considerations are important, but to me, the last two are the most important, especially the institutional knowledge. As you mentioned, we've lost a lot of great staff and employees who had years and years of institutional knowledge. And we as an organization need to figure out a way to capture all of that institutional knowledge before these employees leave. And it's a shame we've lost all of that hard work and dedication. But I think just moving forward, we need to make sure, again, how do we capture it and what's the best way? And because we have all these vacant positions and we're bringing in new employees. It's good that we're bringing in new employees into these positions, but that background knowledge of things that have happened in the past, of processes and protocols of whatnot and whatnot, if that's not passed on to these new positions, these new department directors that may come in, that's a lot of, in my mind, a lot of progress that has been lost. I know staff that are currently already there can help that new person, but it's more time for the person to play catch up, rather than us having a system in place of capturing all of that knowledge that we can pass on to the new person. I think that's, in my mind, it's one of the, again, it's only me. I think that's the most important consideration on this list. It's just that institutional knowledge. Thank you.
Commissioner Davis.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Renee, and thank you to your department. This is really, really good information. It's very educational for me. Do we have, and it's okay if we don't know right now, but I'd be interested to know what the statutorial requirements are for the sheriff's department. Do we know kind of by state law, what are we obligated to say, hey, at the bare minimum, not that I'm advocating for the bare minimum, but at the bare minimum, as a governing body, here's how much you need to fund this. You cannot go any lower or else we're going to be in court. Do we have those numbers?
We don't have those numbers. Right now, what I can say is statutorily, the only requirement that I'm aware of at this moment is the staffing ratio for the juvenile detention center.
And what is that ratio?
It was 12-1.
12-1. Okay. That's very helpful because again, just trying to be mindful of what we are obligated to do. I know we have kind of a list of things that we're looking at of considering reducing in services, but there are other things besides what's on that list that we should be aware of. On the residency requirement, I've seen it done when I worked for the city of Lawrence, for example. It wasn't an either or deal. I've seen it to where department heads had to stay, right? Or there was a certain position that you had to be in management, and then you had to be a resident, and then everybody else, right? You can choose, but wherever you live, you have to live in a certain radius, right? And so just to put that out there, it's not I don't see that conversation as an either or deal. I do see it as something that we can find some sort of a happy medium if that would be beneficial to us. In regards to the sheriff's department, I don't know if we would even have the authority to tell them or to tell Sheriff Sopcich what to do with the residency requirement. As I understand it, the DA, and please correct me if I'm wrong, lifted or amended the residency requirement for employees. I don't know if I'm accurate on that or not.
We'll have to defer to legal counsel.
So yes, the state law treats the district attorney elected position different from other departments. They do have, the elected officials do have more freedom with their budgets than other departments per state law, but the district attorneys office has the most with terms of HR issues. So he has a lot more freedom to craft those policies that he would like.
Gotcha.
Or exempt ones that he doesn't.
Gotcha. I wasn't sure if that same law applied to the other elected folks or is
No,
it
it
just
doesn't.
unique?
It's a little bit of a mishmash.
Sure.
It does for purchasing issues and some budgetary issues, but for HR issues, the DA has sort of different rules than the rest of the elected officials.
I see. That's very helpful because I wasn't sure if we could even direct or what role we had when it came to that. Well, yeah, again, thank you all for this information. I think similarly to in our budget where we have reserves or kind of a percentage or a number that says, hey, you've reached it. Now, maybe we should look at doing something for our citizens, right? Perhaps we should adopt a policy for vacancies that kind of trigger a deep dive look to say, hey, once we reach a certain number, let's really look at what's happening here. before we keep putting these vacancies in the budget and then foregoing other things that citizens have been asking us for. And so just for consideration, but thank you all. This has been very educational. Really appreciate it. Thanks, Mayor.
Commissioner Ramirez.
For more of a request, since there's a lot of talk been about the sheriff and everything. If at either a future special session or a place on the agenda for a future meeting, if we can invite Sheriff Soptic to give an update on his department and his efforts so far on his ability to hire as best as he can. I think it'd be a good idea for us. He hasn't come before us since he's asked for the pay parity. So I think it's just a good time to re-invite him back and just have that discussion with him. Thank you.
Commissioner Stikes.
Yes, on the same line, I think if we're gonna ask the sheriff, let's go ahead and have the chief of police and the heads of the four departments that are, and I don't want to leave out the fire department either. I mean, the four vacancies, I won't have them all in here and let them explain to us why residency is the number one prohibitor for them being fully staffed.
Okay. Administrator.
Yes, if I can finish the staff comments on this. I think the biggest thing that we wanted to answer Commissioner Davis's question. I hope we more than did that. We provide a lot of food for thought here. But one of the things that we have to remind ourselves is we are a competitor for labor. And we aren't the only employer in town. Employee in sometimes like we are now, it is an employee market. They have the leverage. In downturn times, when there's a plethora of unemployed or underemployed employees, it turns into an employer market. We're not there. So we have to deal with these ebbs and flows of the economy that create new dynamics in the labor market, but we have to pay attention to what's going on in the labor market. So we are competing with most of the jurisdictions in the KC metro area for a lot of our employees. We have to entice them to call this place home. That is a challenge. Some do embrace it. Just as a matter of fact. And some choose not to apply because of the residency requirement. That's a fact that we have to understand that dynamic. There are people who are paying more than us. We have to know that element of the labor markets to make sure that at the very least we are competitive and will help entice somebody who's thinking about working in a certain field in government that they'll choose us over another one. So there's a lot of issues that are involved in us attracting the right folks to call this place their employment home. So it's nice that we have a dedicated staff in HR that is looking at all those things, working with our department heads. One of the questions you asked is what's the recruiting costs? Some of our hardest placed positions, we may have to repost 3, 4, 5 times, and it's the same amount of time, dollar amount to pay for each attempt. And usually there's a twist of finding a unique way to get into a different part of the market to advertise vacancies. That forces us to look outside our normal comfort zone to how to reach the masses about our positions. But that means those positions have a high recruiting position because we're not getting the applicant pool, but we still have the need. So it's a very, working with labor is a very dynamic environment and trying to get folks to apply and accept offers here. So I hope what you saw tonight is it's not just throwing an ad out there, sifting through applications and making a hire. There's a lot more to it, and it's more complicated than maybe Joe and Sally, a layperson, can appreciate. So hope we brought a little bit more enlightenment to that dynamic. Thank you.
Commissioner Johnson, I think you had a question for me. You wanted me to weigh in on something? Yeah. You mentioned me. I don't know if there's anything specific you want me to.
No, sir, I don't, I did.
Well, okay, I'm right there with you. Well, I think I agree with the administrator and I agree with Commissioner Kane and Commissioner Johnson in regard to, I think one of the administrator, what he's really hitting on, I have my master's in HR, and so it is complex when you talk about hiring and retaining people for certain jobs. I know when you look at families or individuals, and there is a dynamic there. Let's just talk about generationally. One thing when you talk about retention is the generation gap. My generation, and I believe my parents' generation, we were more in tune to stay with one company, to stay to that company from high school to retirement. It seems to be a trend now with the younger generation. They look for opportunities. And that has created a very competitive market when you talk about the pool. If you look at just a lot of information that's out there on SHRM, I encourage you all to do that. One of the things that they also look at is affordability. You look at schools, you look at the infrastructure, you look at the amenities, you look at the housing. And I'm not talking about low income housing. I'm talking about housing that is affordable for a family to move into, especially in today's world. Even rental, what's affordable when you talk about rental properties for the working class individuals, and things that will entice people to live, work, play, raise families. When you talk about parks and recreation and things of those natures, so there's a lot of things that go into that. Taxes, utility rates, those play into it, and people are going to go where it's more attractive. I think that plays out. I heard someone the other day, I was at a meeting and they said that 70% of the highest paying jobs that are in Wyandotte County, most of the people that have those jobs don't live in Wyandotte County. You can look at KU. I've seen it when I worked on the police department, look at General Motors, look at a lot of our higher paying wage jobs, and you can talk to some of those employees. You'd be shocked how many just don't live in Wyandotte County. And for a variety of reasons, some of which that I named. And so how do we entice those people to see Wyandotte County as a great place to live, work, and raise a family? And there's a lot of factors that play into that, especially when Wyandotte County has some of the highest paying jobs in the metro. And so what's left here is a lot of individuals that have needs. The question came up about hiring, and I just know over the years, I'll use the police department for an example. There was never a problem of hiring when I first got hired. When I got hired on back in '87, there was a class, testing class of probably about 650 individuals that wanted to go on the police department. And that was back then. That remained steady and pretty, steadfast up until probably the early 2000s when we started struggling. I was involved in hiring. One of the problems that I've seen with hiring is the lack of our will or the ineffectiveness of us to hire people of color. I've always said this when I was on the police department, against the grain, that the police department, public safety, and just the unified government individually should be made up of the community that it looks like, and not just in the lower paying, but all the way up to the actual decision makers. A government of the people, for the people, that's reflective of all the people throughout the organizations, and making sure that those individuals not only are put in place and are figureheads, but they're also supported to give it the same level of support and respect as their peers. And that has been a challenge going over the years in my experience, and a lot of people I've talked to in my experience here at the unified government. There is a pool When I was involved in hiring, I know I think it was 2003, we worked with the churches. We brought in more minority candidates than had ever been brought forward. But the unified government at that time, or the police department, still hired the same amount of minority applicants as they normally did. What's disturbing is some of those applicants went on to work at other police departments, particularly Kansas City, Missouri, and some Johnson County agencies. And so the question was, why weren't these individuals from Wyandotte County that were qualified, some military, went to school here, great criminal backgrounds, and no criminal backgrounds, come from great families, and they weren't good enough to work in our community, but other communities saw fit to hire them. So when I talk about a lot of complex issues involved in hiring, those are some of them. When you talk about diversity, inclusion, and access, and I've said it before, and I've seen it, and I didn't grow up here, but what I have noticed is just this, and it's not a perception. In my opinion, it's reality. You shouldn't have to be privileged, connected, powerful, or influential to get a job or have access to anything here at the unified government. And those are some of the barriers and things that I've seen, not because people have told me, because I've personally experienced it, I've personally seen it, and I've personally advocated against it. Because it's not right when you talk about equity and inclusion and how many have had those challenges. And I think if you look over the years, and I can just talk about the police department, the number of lawsuits that have come as a result of EEOC complaints because of the inequities that have gone here at the unified government. So when you talk about not being able to hire people that are quality, I reject that notion because we have great people here in Wyandotte County that are talented, that are educated, that are capable, that want to work, but have been somehow, for some reason, shut out. And those are the things that we need to talk about. There was racism is a countywide issue, came up from the health department, still waiting on the finalization of that report. But I can tell you this, what I didn't see is looking at the inequities and some of the racist practices that have gone here at the unified government for decades. That needs to be examined as well. It's hard to point the finger at our community and say that they're racist, or that there's inequities, or there's bias, or there's discrimination, when several fingers can be pointed back at the practices of this unified government historically. And so those are some things we need to look at and correct and make sure that everyone has not just a seat at the table, but has an opportunity that wants it for success. When you talk about the residency rule, in law enforcement, I struggle with that one. I agree with Commissioner Kane. I'm community driven. If the community is for the residency rule, I think as all with anything that people have seen me do, it's not what I want. It's what this community wants, and better yet, what they deserve. And if they say this is what we want, I think as a elected official, I'm obligated to try and meet the reasonable expectations that our community has for us. And if they say they don't want a residency, I can support that. Some of the arguments that have been given to me against the residency is, and I'll just use public safety. There's a large minority community here. And we know the issues that some of the minorities have had, not just here recently within the last decade, but throughout. Going back to Jim Crow, slavery, and before that. And so when you talk about residency, that hits home to a lot of people when you have law enforcement that doesn't live here, that this community is paying for. They go back to their home, probably to our neighbor in the South, and they use the tax dollars from the residents here to pay property taxes for their home, send their kids to probably Johnson County schools, and then they come back in here and police this community. That type of ideology goes against everything that community policing stands for. If you look at 21st century policing, what has worked is police officers living, working, playing, raising their families, and getting to know the community that they both serve and they live in. And so I tend to side with that notion when it comes to public safety, that our police officers and our public safety officials should live here as a matter of getting to live and work and experience what Wyandotte County. It says a lot when people want to come here and make a living off this county, but aren't good enough to live with the people in this county. I had to live here. I've lived here my entire adult life. And so throughout my career on the police department. And I did just fine. And I've lived in just about every corner of this community and I've never had any problems. But I think even with that, it goes back to affordability and some of those other things I talked about. We've got to make not just the unified government attractive, because I do believe if you look at where we stand with our pay, salary, and benefits and the type of leadership that we have with the unified government, I'd say we probably rate higher than most. But then when you look at what's available to candidates that may be looking for a place to relocate, I think there's a lot of challenges there that we got to look at if we're really going to be serious about how to attract and retain good employees. Because people are going to go where there are clean streets, nice parks, amenities, good restaurants, activities, entertainment, those types of things that are going to draw families to want to stay in the community. And so those are some of the challenges that I see. To answer Commissioner Davis's question, he hit on the question about the sheriff. I know that Sheriff Green, and I believe that either legal or HR should get, he actually had a lawsuit or a legal challenge to the UG back when he was sheriff about that very question about the UG not giving him the funding and the resources he needed for his sheriff's department to operate. He actually won, or it was settled. And I believe by state statute that the municipalities are required to make sure that the sheriff department is adequately funded so he can perform the essential duties required for the job. So hopefully that answered a little bit of your question, Commissioner Johnson. And I know some of you wanted the sheriff, and I'll also bring in the DA. I'll facilitate the fire as well as the police department, and we'll bring them back before you, and we can let them share with this body and the public about some of the challenges they have with recruiting and retaining.
Here, I would ask for Public Works. They're in the top 4.
Okay, Public Works as well. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Renee. HR staff, appreciate it. Ready to go? Mayor Pro Tem, thank you very much. Asking that we continue. We are shuffling seats right now. So when Reggie nests, we can continue with our budget workshop. So Reggie, whenever you're ready.
Good evening, everyone. Last week, we had started a presentation and we did not get to finish, so we wanted to get that presentation finished up tonight. Also, during that presentation, there were some of the financials. We had to go back and look at the numbers. We also wanted to cover those before we jump into the rest of the presentation. Some of those slides were the county general fund.
Reggie, can you make sure you pull that mic real close to you?
One of the funds was the county general fund that we looked at last week, and there were some numeric numbers that we had to adjust. So the slide we're looking at currently now is scenario A for the county general fund. And basically the top financial is the 2024 proposed budget, how we presented it on August the 10th when we presented the 2024 proposed budget. Then below is the revenue neutral. This was something that was asked that we bring back how revenue neutral would look with the county general fund. And so one of the things we can see when we proposed the budget back on August the 10th, county general fund had a 10% reserve fund balance. And then if we were to go revenue neutral for 2024, it ends up having a 3% fund balance. But the most important thing is we wouldn't be able to approve a budget because that budget would be in the negative $575,000 cash basis wise. And then we can kind of see the trajectory going out to 2028. We wouldn't be able to approve a budget any of those years. But the proposed budget that we presented on August the 10th, we wouldn't have the fund balance that our policy that we passed back in 2018 of 17%, we wouldn't have that fund balance, but we would have like a 10% fund balance. And it would generally start to rise once we get out to 2027 and 2028. Some work would still need to be done. We wouldn't have a structural imbalance, and so we would be able to like start raising the fund balance.
Reggie, I'm so sorry, right off the bat. The top chart is when we say proposed, meaning at the current mill levy rate.
Yes.
The top chart holding the levy rate steady. Oh, okay, so we would have at 24, we would have a 10.4% reserve at the end of 24,
Hold the mill rates.
holding it the same. And then the bottom chart is the revenue neutral scenario
Yes.
for the county. And you're saying that would be a budget that by law we actually could not adopt
Oh, we couldn't, yeah, we could not adopt it
because it's out of,
unless we went back and like did some cuts or so.
okay, thank you.
Current slide is the county general fund. And we're calling this scenario B. One of the things that came forward from when we presented the budget is you wanted to see what a 2 mil reduction would look like. That 2 mil reduction equates to about $3.7 million coming off of revenues in 2024. So we can see the 2024 proposed budget, which is the top financials. That is the budget that we proposed back on August the 10th. And it doesn't have any adjustment to the mill rate. The bottom financial has the 2 mil reduction. And we can see in 2024, we end up being $5.7 million structurally imbalanced compared to $2 million. So it more than doubles our structural imbalance. And then also we do end up having a cash basis fund balance of $1.8 million, but our reserves fund balance ends up dropping to almost 6%. And what we presented on August the 10th, we're about 10.4%. The important thing next year, though, is as we get into 2025, we end up being almost $2 million in the negative cash basis fund balance wise. So we definitely couldn't approve a budget from 2025, 2026, 2027, or 2028.
Commissioner McKiernan.
So one thing that I want to just double check on here is that what you're showing is if we drop the income by dropping the mill, and what is kind of understood, but we haven't spoken it out loud, is that's a starting place. And if we wanted to then erase some of the imbalance in fund balance at the end of the year, then we would be charged with finding places to cut expenses, a fractional or commensurate amount so that we could get there. I mean, we're making an assumption here, we would drop our income, but hold expenses at the proposed level. But it is possible, and you're going to give us some options for that later on, but it is possible that we could choose one or more places to make expense reductions that would then modify what's on the board, right?
That is exactly right.
Perfect, thank you.
And as you said, a little more into the presentation, we will have options and scenarios to look at reducing expenses, and we also have an exercise where we will allow you all to make reduction. So last week when we looked at the city general fund, there weren't any adjustments that needed to be made with the city general fund numbers. Just as far as like cutting the mills and going revenue neutral. There was an adjustment that Commissioner Davis noticed with the BPU pilot relief. So the top financial was what we originally proposed back on August 10th for the 2024 proposed budget for the city general fund. And we can see 2024 budget has almost a 25% fund balance. The amount's like $42 million. Our structural imbalance is $732,000. We can see each year that that structural imbalance does continue to grow slightly. And out in 2028 is where we run into issues where our fund balance drops below our 17%. Our BPU pilot relief down at the bottom, that's the financials that are showcasing that. And what that BPU pilot relief is, we have like $750,000 additional revenue within our budget that will come from BPU raising their rates as far as like what the pilot revenue we will receive. So what we did was add an additional $750,000 into our budget that could be used for pilot relief. And that is shown in the bottom financials. So you can see in 2024, we have like $750,000 in the pilot relief line. And that amount is added to the expenses. And we can see that fund balance wise, we're still in the range of like, we're over the 17% and we do have 24% fund balance. And it does slightly start to reduce each year, but it's pretty comparable to what's in the proposed. We get out to 2028, again, we still do drop below the 17% fund balance.
Reggie, we have a comment question from Commissioner Ramirez.
Thank you, Madam Pro Tem. So please correct me if I'm wrong, because this is how I heard it, and I want to clarify in my head. So we're taking the 750,000 is the windfall from the increase in the rates. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, so we're taking the windfall, but then expending an additional same amount for BPU for pilot relief. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, that's what I thought I heard. I just wanted to clarify. So we're taking the windfall, but then turning right around and sort of way expending the same amount to give back that relief.
That is correct.
All right, thank you.
Question.
Commissioner Stites.
But Reggie, I want to make sure I'm clear on this, but that give back of that $750,000 is not going to everybody that their rates increased.
Right.
It's only going to a select group, correct?
So we haven't totally made the decision on how it would be dispersed. But we do have like a couple of different options. There is the sales tax utility, the utility rebate programs that we have, and then there are also programs that Commissioner Bynum considered.
But just
All those, not the whole population would get all of those.
Right, so what I said was correct, right? So not everybody that's paying more BPU on their bill is going to see any type of relief from it.
based on the proposal that's been brought forward, that's correct.
Thanks.
Any other question? Okay. Next, I'm going in our last presentation, we left off, went through some of our scenarios, so I was going to catch back up to slides we left off on. And the slides we left off on were slides related to our, okay. So last time we left off on covering Parks and Rec, and just kind of refresh everyone. What we had started doing was going through what we felt and went through our expenses and felt was discretionary spending, money that we did not have to spend. And so we looked at about 5 other packages last week, and we're gonna start going back through packages again. So what we're going through now is the Parks and Recreation. Parks and Recreation has a transfer from the city general fund of about $4.9 million. And actually this year we increased that $470,000 in 2024 over 2023. Some of the things that are included there are parks and grounds and trails and shelters and playgrounds, pools, spray parks, athletic fields, and then also recreation programs, which include youth and adult athletic program leagues, recreation center programs and summer programs, and then also special population program.
Reggie, we have Commissioner Kane.
Well, we all know we're there. It's a semi joke and semi not a joke. West of 435, north of Parallel, we pay a tremendous amount of taxes and we still don't have a park. And I have no idea why we haven't tried to work with the school district. We tried to work with BPU and there's been a little bit of work. But in my mind, in the community's mind, not enough work. You know, we just passed our taxes out and mine was $2,000 more. And when somebody says, well, how come they got a park in town? They got a spray park, they got this, they got that, and we don't. And I'm tired of saying we don't have the money. You know, all of you have a park in your area. And it'd be really nice for us to have one out there. And we lost our community center because our former administrator sold it back. And that was a crock. But it's time we do something for the folks out west. You know, it's frustrating that we sit here and when we semi-laugh about it. But those folks have to go out to Bonner to the park or go to Johnson County or somewhere else. And we don't have enough sports here, so they go do this. I had to take my kids out to Johnson County. My grandkids are happy going out to Johnson County because you don't have enough activity out west. So I would really appreciate if staff took a hard look and then Mr. Administrator, you know, none of this stuff. And if you want to talk about it sometime and I'm in a good mood, we can. But I'm tired of mentioning it. We deserve a park and I want a park.
Mr. Johnston, I would say, couple of questions that I think should be researched to Commissioner Kane's point. And I think Commissioner Kane and I and Parks should sit with you, but have the data because I really thought that there had been dedicated money.
There was $250,000 and that's not going to buy you nothing. Angel, if we find some property, Angel's got the folks that will go ahead and supply the equipment for the parks. All we need is ground.
And that's why I thought maybe a conversation to bring the
That
county
would be great.
administrator. up
We
to speed.
own property west of 435. Now, I don't know what we're doing with it,
Okay,
but I got a really good idea what we should do with it. And the community does too. You know, I didn't open up my tax bill. My wife did, and she works at a bank. That was a couple of exciting minutes in my house for me. So, and then you go outside and the kid next door is going out to Johnson County to play soccer because we don't have a place to practice here.
I mean, I
So-
think it's a solvable issue.
Oh,
and let's-
absolutely.
Let's ask the administrator to schedule some time with us and you can show him like the parcels that you're talking about. And I think it's doable. And we know that we had that money dedicated multiple years ago.
Yep.
So anyway,
So maybe we should put another 250,000 in there just to get the fund up because it's going to take money, but it's frustrating for me.
Right.
I've asked for this. I don't know, it was 18 years. I don't know. Somebody else would have to tell me how long ago it was. But it's been a long time. And yeah, I moved out there and they weren't out there at the time, but during annexation, they were promised improved roads, sidewalks. And we are the only, one of the very few that we don't have a sidewalk except a 100-yard long sidewalk on Leavenworth Road from 128th Street to the new school. Our kids can't walk to school. And we talk about safe routes. I want to see one person come out there. I want to see where they've looked at a safe route. And yeah, a lot of those kids ride buses, but we don't have what we were promised long before I moved out there. And I don't know how much money we spend on keeping the other parks up, but it's a tremendous amount of money that, and I'd like to know that, how much money is spent in each district for the parks? And I'll just take half of all of them total. Sorry.
Thank you. Commissioner Stites.
I kind of would like to back that up a little bit. You know, we had talked about some of these other parks that, and I don't remember the number, that are sprinkled throughout this, our city that maybe aren't really serving the purpose that they originally were intended to, right? So maybe there's an opportunity there for us to eliminate some of those. And I don't want people to go, oh, he's against parks. But there's some places that I know that parks that really aren't being utilized, that some of that funding could go towards, right? A park that is been asked for that would get used. So I think somehow we need to start, administrator, maybe we can get that number and start looking at some of those and see how they're used and see if we might be able to look at how we
We know the number, and
we
the
do.
Public Works and Parks Department has the inventory, and Christian led that part of the strategic planning. And it's in our report, so we can get to that. Sorry to jump in, Commissioner Davis.
Yeah, with that, Mayor Pro Tem, I would just add to my colleagues, I have 3 parks in my district. I do not think they are strategically placed for how our community has grown, right? And that's really the issue here, is that as people have migrated and new subdivisions have been platted, all that stuff, the way that our community is designed just doesn't fit the placemaking needs. And so I know Commissioner Ramirez, myself, and Commissioner Markley, we serve on a subcommittee that has looked at parks, that has looked at making some pretty drastic changes. I do want to give our county administrator time to go through that study, but absolutely we need to do an equity study on that and do some redistribution. I'm completely in favor of that. So yeah, thank you, Mayor Pro Tem.
Okay. Commissioner Townsend.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Commissioner Kane has inspired me to speak out. I know this is not for addition necessarily, nor is his park in this budget. However, several good points were made about it. And Mr. Administrator, I'm thinking that the last time I heard a presentation from Parks and Rec, it was about this time of year, or maybe coming up in September, that Ms. Ferrara and her staff will be back to do a summary or a follow-up. And I mention that because in Kansas City, Kansas, the Parkwood Pool is the only pool in this area, and it is over 60 years old. And part of what should come back to us in that summary is the analysis of what condition that pool is in. Is that still the right place for it? What it would take to do something more like an aquatic center, which I finally got to visit in one of the coldest days of this year out in Bonner Springs, and talk to those staff to see what they did to finance that. So as we talk about all this, some of the issues and my colleagues have just raised tonight may be answered in that study.
Commissioner
That should come back to
sorry.
us.
I apologize.
No, go ahead.
We're done.
Well, I guess I am now. Until that comes in, but I don't want to forget what's in the background here, not just Commissioner McKiernan's, not McKiernan, not trying to throw you in Kane's as, I was trying to stay it up, so I don't want to throw you in. I'm sorry. I was looking that. I was looking that way. So I'm looking forward to Parks and Recs coming back to us very soon, I think, to hear about that, to hear what can be done, what was done, and where we go from there with that. But we can't forget that pool. Thank you.
Commissioner Ramirez.
Thank you, Madam Pro Tem. Yes, with the subcommittee that I chair, that's looking at facilities, but also Parks and Recreation in general. By direction of the subcommittee and staff, Angel did undergo, which she did give a preliminary presentation to us at a special session of a presentation about facility or community center usage in just general. And so they have that final report. We have not heard it yet. I was out of town when we were originally going to hear it. And so I think that's when we needed to reschedule. So we haven't had that full report. And quarterly Parks and Rec does come to standing committee and give reports. They are currently undergoing an aquatic study of Parkwood Pool and just in general of and our spray parks and in just general of our aquatic infrastructure. And so there is a lot that is happening. And it's again, with these studies, it takes time for us to gather that information. And then it comes to us after the study's done and of all the recommendations and everything. And of course, the administrator and the staff of which of those recommendations, what part of the study is most important to implement at the time. And so, no, I agree that there is a lot of information that is going to be coming to us soon regarding Parks and Recreation of how we can change things, how we can make Parks and Recreation better, more efficient, where we can touch touch the entire community the best way that we can. And as you know, going back to what Renee, Ms. Ramirez was talking about for HR wise considerations, you know, us being more diligent with Parks and Recreation funding and how we allocate those dollars. So having all of that information, all those recommendations to us, it's going to help us. I agree. And I think Angel and majority of the park staff will agree. We have a lot more parks than is necessary for our population size of community. But again, that's another discussion and more strategic conversation we're going to have with not just amongst ourselves, but with the community. And making sure that it's fair across the board, all corners of our community has a park, some way, shape, or form. More specifically, Commissioner Kane's park should be #1 on the list. But there is a lot of information, a lot of recommendations that are going to be coming to us regarding Parks and Recreation. I'm excited. This is something that the community has been wanting. I know my community, my district, this is Parks and Recreation is something that's very important. You know, I only having one community center, Rosedale, you know, they're working amongst themselves as a community and with the Rosedale Development Association to create a Rosedale Community Center. But just amongst themselves, you know, it's not going to be on the back of our Parks and Recreation. It's going to be the community's responsibility to maintain. And so it's Parks and Rec is just very important all around. And so I'm excited to see what we can do. This is information that we needed. And hopefully with this information, we can update our Parks Master Plan and go through that process of updating it. Because it's been some years since we've updated it and gone through. So I'm looking forward to it. And I'm looking forward to work with all community and staff and the rest of the commission to make Parks and Rec better. We are surrounded by two communities, Johnson County and KC-Mo, with amazing parks, facilities, and programming. Oh, why can't we have that? We deserve that. And so, well, yes, that too. But but we deserve. And so I thank our Parks and Recreation staff for what they can do with what they have. And so with that, I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. Question or comment, Monday night, we have a budget public hearing at 7:00. Before that, at 5:00 is Public Works and Safety Standing Committee. And the Parks quarterly report is on that agenda. So we will have an update Monday night. Get here early and hang out with Public Works and Safety. Reggie, on this slide, just walk us through Parks and Rec City transfer 4.9 million. Just talk to us about that. What's that mean?
Well, what happens is, city general fund transfers $4.9 million to the Consolidated Parks Fund. And the reason for that is, back in 2007 or 2008, there used to be a separate levy for, city parks. And so, we done away with that, and it actually went into the city general fund. And so it ends up paying the money out to the Consolidated Parks Fund, amount of $4.9 million. And this year we did increase that amount, $470,000. And that's based on the amount of increased taxes that go into the fund. It used to stay stagnant every year, but to be fair for parks, Michael Peterson, who's in our office, he did an adjustment where each year it'll get an increase, so it'll grow at the same amount that other funds grow. This is a community, up under community programs, but it's under Parks and Recreation, and it's property maintenance. Really not a parks function, but it has to do with city and county funded lot mowing in the amount of $950,000. Some of that is in the city, on the city side, which is about $650,000. It takes care of weed lots and does 14 rounds of biweekly mowing. Then on the county side, there's $300,000 that is spent from here, and that's to take care of land bank lots and also 14 rounds of biweekly mowing. And then we have another amount for land bank lot weed mowing or spraying at $85,000. Next is part of just under our community programs category is transit services. So we're estimating we spend about $7.2 million on transit services. Some of this is grant funded. But we do have $3 million that we pay out to the KCATA for routes that they run for us. There's about 4 different routes they run for us, and they also run them on the weekend. They're about $3 million. And then there is the zero fare impact to our budget. So zero fare has been in place since about 2020 and have started around COVID. So what happens is we lost $700,000 of revenue to our budget once we start doing zero fare. So what we would recommend here, if we would make some cuts or so, is we reinitiate collecting fares, and then also look at if we want to do KCAT contract. Here, under general government category for the government is software license agreements. And again, the only reason that this is here is because this is money that we're not obligated, where we have to spend, where there's no statutes related to it. But it would definitely cripple our government if we did not spend the money on our software licensing agreement. Spend about $4.6 million across both the city and the county. City, we spend $3 million. County, we spend $1.6 million. Some of the things that we have there are our new ERP system, Workday. We also have our Microsoft Enterprise Agreement, land management system, enterprise mapping systems and our tax management systems, and then our timekeeping systems and a host of other software license and agreements.
Mayor Pro Tem. Oh,
Who had their hand up first? Commissioner Johnson?
yes. Thank you, sir. Reggie, I don't know, it was a couple, 2 or 3 years ago, we had a problem with reaching our software, and I can't remember exactly what that's for. Maybe some of my colleagues can remember. Security breach. And we found out that we did not have the proper, was it insurance? At that time. Is that now built into our overall budget? Can you tell us whether or not we
So we definitely do have the funding for the cybersecurity insurance. We are out on the market in the procurement process of getting it.
so we don't have, we still don't have it?
We are in the process very, very close to.
When
We had to qualify ourselves to be able to get it, so.
what does that mean? Qualify ourselves, help me.
So I don't know if someone would speak to it there. There were certain things we had to do to bring our systems up to
Right.
par where insurance companies would look at us so that we could make it through the underwriting process.
Do we have an ETA on that?
I think it would probably definitely either by the fourth quarter or first quarter of next year.
I don't have to remind anybody here, but maybe even our listening audience that was a real big problem that we had to endure. And I pray that we never have to deal with that. So we need to get that post-haste, whatever can be done, we need to get that in place. Thank you.
And Reggie, if I remember correctly, it was the fact that we're out on the open market, we may find it a little more expensive and a little more difficult to find an insurer that's willing to insure us if we haven't met the criteria that they set forth, because we've already had a breach. And the costs associated to that. So if I remember correctly, that is some of the criteria that we're going to be dealing with also. So even if we do find one, the cost could be quite high. Any other questions before we move on? Seeing none, please.
So in our public safety category, some of the discretionary programs that we did put out to consider being cut are outreach programs, both the sheriff and police departments. And so what these would do, the programs, both sheriff and police department, they both are $90,000.
Commissioner Stites.
I kind of couldn't hear you, but did you say the potential to cut out?
Yeah, so we're listing
Sure, I
in
can hear you now.
discretionary spending
Okay,
and the potential to cut.
okay.
I think this is a proposal that they've brought forward, that these aren't the mandated by ordinance, statute, or resolution. And it falls within maybe some of you with needs, but it more or less falls into our wants, that these are programs that we would like to see incorporated to help with some of the issues we've had a discussion with today. Commissioner Ramirez.
Thank you, Mr. Pro Tem. So I may have in my brain, it's been a long day. So these are all, everything that we've so far discussed of all these lists is discretionary. These are the programs and services we possibly could make cuts from. Is that
Yes.
correct?
Yes, that is.
Okay, I was reading this completely wrong. Thank you.
Yeah, please continue.
So here we're under organization, this is the public works category, and what we're looking at here are street capital programs that we feel are discretionary and that we're bringing forward as a potential to cut here. So we have street preservation, we got $12.6 million of street preservation within our budget. We did increase that amount from $10 million last year as part of the 25% increase that we need to improve our streets each year. $5.3 million of that is like within certified funds. None of it is in the city general fund. So we could move money out of like special street and highway or dedicated sales tax and backfill the expenses from the city general fund into those funds if we were to look at like offering an additional tax levy relief. But one of the things that with the street preservation and moving funding from special street and highway or dedicated sales tax, it is something that we're definitely trying to get away from. One of the things that Administrator Johnson talks about, we shouldn't be paying for some street preservation out of debt, and we're doing that now. So as we start to like backfill expenses back into our special sales tax, it kind of forces us to get debt and stay in the debt revolution that we have been in. Also, we have listed here, and again, this is all discretionary spending that we're bringing forward, is our new county infrastructure initiative fund, which will go to benefit all the cities.
Reggie, why don't you pull your microphone a little closer,
All the
please?
cities within Wyandotte County. So it include Bonner Springs, Edwardsville, and the city of Kansas City, Kansas. And what this does is provide $2 million of infrastructure to that the cities would split across Wyandotte County.
I just blurted out like I own this place. I'm sorry. I have a question.
Please go ahead.
Like we're on a one-on-one meeting here. Nobody else is here, Reggie. Sorry. Mayor Pro Tem. Thank you. Wow, Chuck Stites, District 7. Would you explain what that, the intended purpose of that is? And I think that it goes to help with bullet point number 1, right? That's what this would go to address over a countywide.
It definitely helps the city of Kansas City, Kansas with their street pavement preservation. We did put funding towards more funding towards street preservation within the city of Kansas City, Kansas this year, and also Bonner Springs and Edwardsville. However they choose to spend on infrastructure within their cities, they would have the same ability to do also. And the other category of our budget is our capital improvement program. And so what we would look at cutting the things that are discretionary, city general fund, capital projects. So we have capital cash projects, which are about $1.6 million in the city general fund. Then we have capital equipment, that's about $1.4 million. And then we also have county general fund, capital projects are about $1.2 million. And then we have equipment allocation that is $900,000. And the impact there is, if we were to eliminate all of these or some of these, we would be definitely doing away with equipment, and equipment would include like buying police cars, buying fire apparatus, also just projects across both the city and the county. We would be greatly reducing what could be done there.
Question. This slide is, it's CIP. Is it budgeted in cash or debt?
So we have a combination. This
Okay.
portion is what's budgeted within the city general fund and county general fund.
All this is budgeted in the city general. Okay,
Yeah, so, but we do have a portion that is debt, but this is only the city and the county.
okay.
The current slide is a view of all the options that had discussed that are related to the city general fund. We can see it kind of lists down the left-hand side of the page. We had cuts possible cuts that could come from the Neighborhood Resource Center. Also a category of safety net programs, and then also Parks and Rec, transit, software licensing agreement, public safety outreach, our capital program, and then outside contributions that we pay to vendors that provide outside services for us. So the total here is $22 million.
Commissioner Stites.
Reggie, could you explain the, under software maintenance? How is that $3 million different than if you were to back up maybe 2 or 3 slides where we talked about where Commissioner Johnson spoke about go forward. Yes, software licensing agreement and such, where we're talking 4.6 here. Is this $3 million that's in this bullet point, the $3 million that is being depicted in this slide that we're talking about now? Okay, all right.
The slide we were looking at earlier was, everything was for the city general fund. And we see on this slide right here, the city general fund is the $3 million.
Okay,
That's what.
got it. Thank you.
So this slide is similar to the slide we just looked at, and it is exclusively for county general fund, and it's the options that were there. So we have Parks and Rec. We also again have software licensing agreements, public safety outreach, also our capital improvement program, and then the contributions we make to outside agencies. So the total there for the county general fund is $6.5 million.
Commissioner Kane.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I don't think the county fair is an option. I think we have to give them that money, don't we?
That was actually going to be one of my questions. Are these outside of the mill levy required funding amounts for fair and mental health?
For the outside agencies, yes,
Okay.
that's
These are in addition to.
right. And I think we talked about the fair. The 100,000 is the Eugene's contribution to the fair. It was, I think there were additional expenses that we are required to pay to reimburse them for supplies. But the 100,000 portion was the amount that you could choose to not, you could elect not to give to the county fair. But you do have to reimburse them for any supplies that they spend in relation to the fair.
But within our tax levy funds, we are obligated to spend a portion of a mill, am I right, on disability services, the county fair, the county mental health center. And those, what I just referenced, is separate and different from this,
Right.
is
These
question
are all-
mark.
These contributions are all within the county general fund.
Okay,
The mental health, the developmental disabilities, those are all separate tax levy
Okay.
funds.
that's what
These
I'm getting at.
expenses are not in those funds.
Okay, thank
It's
you.
All city.
Does the fair
Yes.
still get money?
Yes. Does that answer your question? Commissioner Ramirez.
Thank you, Madam Pro Tem. Well, we asked for a list. They've given a list. And again, to what we all have been saying, what do you want us to cut? And from the list that's been given, majority of these services and programs are things that people use every single day. So it's, we can provide the relief, but again, the other side's gonna have to give way. We see the list that we've asked and it's been given. Now we have to do an exercise. We have to, it seems we're doing an exercise to see if we cut anything or if anything happens. So it again, it's just, again, we can have relief. of these things are we gonna cut? The warming center, Parks and Rec, city transfer, a cadet program to get us more public safety, police, which we need already of more. Capital projects, infrastructure, do we want to cut those? Lawn mowing, that's something that we get a lot of constituent complaints, is upkeep of not only private property, but our property, land bank property, parks. At that. Sheriff cadet program. A list has been given. And so now we go through an exercise of, if we go through tax relief, what do we get to cut? And I know we're here. It's been stated many times since throughout these last budgets. The reason why we're here is to make the big decisions. I understand we're here to make those big decisions. But why are we being forced to make those big decisions? So that's all I gotta say. Thank you.
Commissioner Stites.
Just a real quick question, Reggie, would you just tell me what the under capital cash projects 1.235? What would that be? What would fall under that category?
So one thing that would definitely be there is a new sheriff intake center. Would definitely be in there, and it's about $500,000. Yes.
Is it something they would configure within their space?
Yeah, so they
Oh, okay.
currently have an intake of, they have an intake facility over there now, and it needs to be improved.
I see.
It needs to be greatly improved.
Okay.
That's why it's here.
Sounds like there's numbers to support that. What's the other $700,000?
Go to the budget.
I don't know if some of it was earmarked for a park out west.
Some
Wow.
of it is for, one of the things is for upgrade the EOC audio visual system. Also annual hardscape landscaping. It goes on at all our UG buildings.
All UG buildings?
Yeah, all
City
unified
buildings?
government.
City buildings? Or county, all.
Just kept, so there's a portion of it. We have some in the city general fund, and we also have some in the county general fund, and it's for county buildings, a portion that's in here. We also have district attorney software upgrades that are here. We have outdoor warning systems. We have Everbridge contact HR database.
So it's all accounted for. I mean, it's not just a pot of money that when something pops up, we use it, right? Okay. Thanks.
Commissioner Kane.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. The audio is terrible and can't hear, and the noise is fuzzy. That's from the folks trying to watch.
Okay, we'll take note of that and see maybe we all talk better into our microphones for one thing. Commissioner Burrows.
Thank you, Reggie. I'm looking at the totals. We have 22,304,000 on the previous slide, and we have 6 million, a little excess, 6.5 million on this slide, discretionary spending. Some of it is, many of us feel it's very necessary. It's things that, as it was stated, that these are things that people in the community have grown accustomed to having funded. I don't think anybody has talked about eliminating them. And I believe what we have discussed is what can we do to ensure that we put ourselves back on the financial track, still provide services. And if we have to tighten our belt a little bit, where can we do it? When you talk about a 5% cut across the board, which is one of the most onerous ways to do things. However, it is a starting point that if you look at the 26, 28 million, I think we're roughly talking about $1.5 million in savings with a 5% cut. You take 5% off of 2 million for the county initiative fund. That's not a whole lot of money out of a fund that large. But when you start taking 5% out of the YCO sports, that might affect some equipment for a ball team or something along those lines. So I might just encourage my colleagues as we start working through this. I don't want to. It's never been the intent, I don't believe, of anyone here to eliminate a program, flat out eliminate it, unless it's not serving a purpose and that money can go for a more common good. I would just state that these funds are funds that have grown over the years, or they have been stagnant for a period of time, and they're still providing services. It may be time for us to look at that and see what we all would refer to as a return on investment. We have to find some savings somewhere. If we don't want to eliminate a complete program, then by all means, let's look at what we can do about maybe cutting back the funding for a year or two, keep the program out there and ask those organizations to find sponsors or to our neighborhood groups to come forward with some additional volunteer activities. There's ways we can get through this budget and share the pain and not cause deep cuts. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Commissioner Kane?
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I thought the purpose this year was to figure out a way for us to get through this year's budget with the least amount of disruption all across the board. And then the administrator, the day after we agree to do this, then he comes back and starts figuring out where we can do these things right out of the gate. I mean, am I wrong in that, Mr. Administrator?
I think you so eloquently, succinctly, and that was rare, stated it correctly. I think one of the things that when we started this, I said, my goal when we started this whole process about 7 weeks ago is we were facing a $10.7 million debt or deficit in the city general fund, and then the alarming what would happen in 2026. And so the goal was to eliminate that $10.7 million with the idea that buys us time. And as you saw in those presentations that Reggie and Michael put together, it did. And it pushed it out 2028, if not further, which then buys us time to really do the deep dives that we talked about. I think what you asked for here and you got presented are general fund, non-essential government services. These are things that you've heard, you and previous commissioners have heard that the public wanted to meet a public need, but you're not required to provide it, but you did it because you were trying to address the community. What you're saying, it's $22 million. It's a lot of money. And I think as we work into the next year, 2 years, there's gotta be some tough discussions. While at the same time, staff and I look at how we provide our services already. I mean, I get complaints, it takes forever to get a permit. Why is that? We have lack of communication to our public, so improve customer service, maybe an attitude towards servant leadership, where we remind ourselves that we're here to provide services to our citizens, not serve my own agenda. And so that's a reorientation of focus. And at the same time, look at efficiencies, bring recommendations to your, for your consideration and discussion about, are some of the things we're doing actually needed today? Or as we look to our considered, or our continued budget, is it time to maybe put those on a shelf till we get back on better footing? So there's a lot of dynamics that I see us going through as a team, from commission, administrator's office, and staff, that we have to realize we have a structural imbalanced budget, even after we dealt with that $10.7 million deficit. You know, the best budget is to have more revenues than expenses. And we're dropping $3 million out of reserves, $6 million still. Eventually there's a day that you can't continue to do that. At the same time, Commissioner Ramirez and a few of you said, we need to be able to attract investment that will provide more revenue into our unified government coffers. But if we aren't providing good services to our citizens and our businesses, they talk to their family members and their business fraternity members, and that will possibly influence future investment decisions. We don't want that. So I think I presented a budget that met what I told you was the goal, is to reduce the immediate budget that created the alarms in 2026 and bought us time to do the work necessary that we do. This exercise showed you how much those discretionary things cost. And I don't think you ever had a list like this. So, and so now you have it. You also had a presentation on how much we rely on debt to do our jobs. And where you have today, 44% of your general fund revenue from property taxes pay for debt. Don't forget that that debt adds mills to our taxpayers. And I think what we've done over time is rely on debt to do what we feel we need to do for our community. But it's time. I said this once before publicly. It's interesting that I'm the schmuck sitting in the chair that has to deliver these types of messages. And I just had a couple of staff members today say, "Hey, Dave, we knew this day was coming. Now you're the schmuck on the chair that has to deal with it." And I don't have a problem with that. It's just, we can't ignore it anymore. If we want to remain a viable community, a better community in the future, we have to accept where we're at, make tough choices over the next couple of years to get us back on a better trajectory that we want, to where we don't have to be criticized by our public saying, "You're not doing anything to provide me relief, my mother relief," or being asked to provide more funds to meet the growing social demands in our community. But sometimes we have to have a hard stop, take a hard look at where we're at, then take the time to make adjustments to address things in the future. I think we're there. We can't be Congress and kick the can down the road. We can't be Congress and print money we don't have. We're required to have a budget balance by our state laws. And You have that in my recommendations. If you want to modify it, as I told you, I'll give you recommendations to cut. Here's a start.
Uh,
And there you go.
Thank you. And I think, I mean, you've laid it out for us. So Commissioner Kane and then Commissioner Bynum has a
Waiting for you.
question and a comment.
I don't think I'd call you a smuck in public. Maybe I would.
You've used other words, but we won't go there.
So the bottom line is what you're recommending is what I think we're talking about. And that we should move forward for this year, so you can put us back on track for next year, correct?
Yes, and that's a strong message to my staff that there will be changes.
Okay. I think we're where we should be. I think everyone realizes that we're in a tough spot. And that we need to do what you said. And then if you come back next year, that we're gonna hold you accountable. Well, the community is gonna hold us accountable. So we're gonna hold you accountable. So I would think we would move forward with what he's presented. And tell the folks, this is the best we could do. And the goal is to correct it next year. Because if we don't, we are gonna be broke in a couple of years. I mean, if anybody thinks I'm crazy, tell me.
Oh, yeah.
Just
Go hands.
just a couple of things, comments and questions, I guess, kind of interspersed in the list of city options and county options. To me, assume other things are just off the table. I guess we talked about that. I sure don't remember it. I will say, to the administrator's point and to Commissioner Kane as well, we've been through some really hard times here, and Commissioner Kane was here for those. And he knows what those difficult decisions looked like, and they included furloughs and getting us through the economic downturn of 08 and 09. And we lived through that as residents. We know what it was like, and a lot of the employees here lived through that, and you had to help us come to those difficult decisions of what were we going to do as a government to survive that. So saying that, I say it because it gives me hope. We've been there and we can come through times like that again. I am going to be very bold and put my 2 mills on the table, because I would like to look for 2 mills on the city side. I want the $750,000 pilot relief program. It's paid for. So to me, that's a wash. And given what I just said, on the city side, on the list of stuff that's optional, 18.4 million of it to me is not optional. And again, 3 million for public transit, not optional, in my opinion. I don't understand the 3 million software maintenance. I don't understand how that's optional, but somebody might be able to help me understand how software maintenance is optional. 5.37 for street maintenance to me is not optional. I guess I understand it in the sense of it's not mandatory. But to me, it's certainly not optional. That's the number one thing people ask for. Talk about responding to what the community asks for. What they ask for in the number one spot year over year is street maintenance. So that doesn't feel very optional. And I'll stop. But here's what I just said. 2 mills on the county side that I'm willing to work with you all to find. City side, city side, city side, city side, city side. that I'm willing to stay here and find. And I just told you the stuff that doesn't sound very optional to me. So let's see who had their hand up. Commissioner Davis, I think. Did you? And then Commissioner Markley. We'll go Davis, Markley, Ramirez. Thank you. We're going to go Davis, Markley, Ramirez, Sights. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, and even not having the mayor here really doesn't give us kind of the full opinion or the guidance forward for this commission. So I do worry about the effectiveness of what we're about to do and whether or not it holds any weight. I am absolutely for BPU pilot relief. When it comes to cutting the mills, I would love to see what one mill will look like on the city side. And then, of course, we do have two right in front of us. I do think, though, colleagues, that we might be cutting it a little close, given the time of which we're doing this activity and the fact that for a lot of these programs that we are looking to cut, we do not have representatives that can give us the context before us and say, hey, this is what this particular program is, and this is why it would be valuable. We don't have Greg Kendall here from Wyandotte. We don't have folks from the county fair here to say, hey, wait a minute, this is why. The other thing is, it's not an all or nothing deal. We could look at reduced funding, not necessarily no funding, but I just worry about on paper identifying and just saying we're not, we shouldn't fund this or we need to reduce it without getting the full context from the people that actually run the program. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Markley.
Well, Mayor Pro Tem, I don't want to crush your hope because I do think there's lots of hope, but I do think it bears pointing out that coming out of that recession, some of the public work problems we face today were created by the decisions we made during that time to try to make things stretch, and that we then spent years paying back our own funds that we borrowed from in order to make things stretch. So I do think there's hope, but I would say I would caution that some of the decisions we made to make things work during that time are probably not decisions we would want to repeat, because they exacerbated the issues that we're now facing in terms of our streets issues and parks issues.
Commissioner Ramirez.
Thank you, Madam Pro Tem. I think I could possibly support the BPU pilot relief, because seeing the scenario, it still pushes us back to 2028 to possible we need to take action. We still have time for us as the commission. Oh, sorry, I was covering my microphone. It gives us time as a commission for the administrator and staff to sit down, have those tough discussions about what needs to change. So I could support the BPU pilot providing that, because it gives us, it still works within our budget. It still pushes back our financial doomsday. 2 mil, I'm very, very hesitant on the 2 mil reduction. Because we've seen with the 2 mil reduction what it looks like. And it kind of speeds up the financial doomsday. And so then that doesn't give us and our administrator and staff enough time to have those tough discussions and make those tough decisions. I am a person that I don't like to be rushed in my decision. I want to take time, contemplate, talk, have discussions with the community. So yes, I could do the BPU pilot relief, but possibly no to 2 mil reduction at this time. And in general, I in support of the administrator's budget. He worked hard to get it where it was. He worked very hard with staff to make some tough decisions on his own, and staff to make their tough decisions on their own as well, on reducing expenditures as best as they could. Yeah, we have to have the tough the discussion, but not late at this time in the budget season. We need to start as soon as we pass this budget, the next day. We need to start the planning process for the next one so that we have more time to have those discussions. And so in my opinion, I know I see Ashley over there. She's ready. She's rearing to go. She's ready to go for this. But is this exercise necessary for tonight?
Okay, hang on though. We have Commissioner Stites, then Kane, then Johnson, then Ashley.
And so that's the last thing and only question.
Okay,
Is this exercise necessary?
I understand. I would like to hear the commissioners and at least understand what the exercise would do for us. Commissioner Stites. And then McKiernan after Johnson.
Stites District 7 and Mayor Pro Tem, I agree with you in the aspect of year after year that our constituents out there have overwhelmingly said that street maintenance is on the top of their list. But I would have to think that that was prior to the last 2 years when their evaluations have went through the roof. And now I think that if you were to ask that same question, they would say tax relief is probably at the top of their list, not street maintenance. Thank you.
Commissioner Kane. Commissioner Johnson.
You better let, I guess I'll go right now. I agree with the EPU pilot relief. I think I was one. So I guess to the administrator, I recant my recant. Can that be done? The 750,000, if it can be worked into the budget, I'm for that. If in fact we have to have a discussion about, and let me just go back, that's inclusive of also the rebates that you were talking about as well. Yes, so all that's done. If in fact we were talking about any level of meal reduction, which I am not in favor of, none. But if in fact we were looking at that, then I will be more inclined and also to lean towards what Commissioner Burrows said. And let's look at doing a 5% or whatever reduction across the board. I don't think you can have both. You know, I mean, you have, if you're going to cut your meal levy, that's less money coming in. That means they're trying to be cut somewhere. I don't want to do either one of them, quite frankly. So I'm not in favor of any meal reduction. I agree with the pilot relief, and I agree with the rebates. That's where I am on this. So thank you, Mayor Pro Tem.
You, Commissioner Kane.
One, I don't want to play this game anymore. I played it too much. I don't like it, never have liked it. I was here when we froze wages, we laid people off, we lowered the mill, raised the mill. And I think what the administrator has presented, and I can buy into the $750,000, but what he has presented to us is going to make all of us a knot in our throat for a year. But if we don't do something now, all hell is going to break loose in a couple of years. And I think we can explain it to our constituents that we did the best we could. And the fact that that the administrator already knows that right after we go into this, he's got to go in there and look at what Commissioner Boris was talking about some of these deep dives and stuff like that. I just don't want to lay off any employees. You know, I want to make sure that we maintain what we have, but we have to come up with a budget in short order. And the more modifications we try to make at this late date, we won't, well, we have to have a time frame, right? And we all know that we would have liked to have this before he hired in, right? And we didn't. I guess I'm saying, let's live with what we got and move on.
Commissioner McKiernan.
Thank you. Last year, I said that I would vote for the interim county administrator's budget if we promised the day after the budget to start working on this year's. And we did not do that collectively because we didn't have the leadership that we have now. I am 100% confident that we collectively will start looking at next year the day after this is done. In the meantime, what I would suggest that we as a unified government can do is improve our delivery of services within the structure that we have so far so that we deliver excellent city and county services and so that the people see the results of what they're contributing to this city, that we get excellent at street maintenance, that we get excellent at park maintenance, that we get excellent at people who come in for driver's license renewal, whatever it is, we get excellent at it. And people say, you know what? Well, I'd really not prefer to pay this, but you know what? I'm getting good service while we are on the 1-year path to making substantive changes in how we do business. I am confident we can do that within the year.
Commissioner Burrows.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't believe anyone has called for employees to be laid off, and I do respect that position because it's never been, I don't believe anyone's commitment here to lay off employees and to impact the budget that way. We should provide efficiency. We should provide professional services. We should provide a listening ear to the constituents, no matter what the issue may be. And I believe overall, we as a commission do that. And the opportunity, I said the 5% because that's the easiest way to do something, but we can't keep digging at our reserves and continue to think that we're riding the ship because we're not. And all we're doing is playing a shell game with finances. We have interest rates that are climbing, so we might want to look at our investment policies to increase our revenue from that. We might look at some of our contractual services, see if we need them all and go back and maybe renegotiate those. There's things that we can do within the budget, and I'm not hesitant to do a deep dive. And I really think that that's an opportunity for us to collectively learn to learn more about the budgeting process. And I agree with Commissioner McKiernan. The budget director, the administrator, both collectively worked to present this to us this evening. Had we not seen the total cost of these additional services that we have put on the back of the taxpayer to provide them the services they requested, we wouldn't know what that cost is. And so are we getting a return on the investment that we are giving them? And if not, can we enhance it even better? Or can we eliminate a program that is not being utilized by anyone that was set up 10 or 12 years ago? That's the opportunity going back through the budget. I get a little passionate about the fiscal position our community is in, because if we come upon another hardship, our federal dollars are gone. And then the tough decisions will be made for us. And with the economy and the uncertain position it's in, I grow concerned about watching our reserves diminish. I'd like to see 30% reserves if we could, providing we're providing the right services. But we don't know that yet to the extent that I believe that we should, and this is just my opinion, the $750,000 for the pilot. I know you all have put a lot of work into it. I'm one that believes that if we're going to reduce pilot for someone, we ought to reduce it for everyone. Everyone should have an opportunity to have a reduced pilot. And I don't know how that fits into other people's opinion, but I just hate picking winners and losers when it comes to fees and something that everybody is paying, and we're only going to give it to a certain population. But other than that, the mills, I'm pleased to hear us talking about lowering the mills. I'm really pleased to hear the budget discussions that we've had in the last handful of weeks. And I can't thank the administrator enough, because he's put confidence in us that we can resolve this issue. And I don't believe that was something that was here 2 years ago. So thank you, Mr. Administrator, for giving us the confidence, or at least giving this commissioner the confidence to go back and know that we're going to right this ship in the future as we move forward. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, colleagues.
Thank you very much. It's 7:30. How are we feeling? Good? Dismiss. We're not going anywhere. So, I was gonna check in on whether we needed 10 minutes because I don't want to break the momentum of the evening, but just checking if we needed 10 minutes. I might need it. I did take a phone call about a family member and I'm hanging in as best I can. Because what we're doing is important. So part of the reason I suggested 10 minutes was kind of selfish. Thank you very much. So we'll reconvene at 8:40. We'll recess for 10. Thank you. Thank you very much. I did have kind of some more things I wanted to put on the table and I don't want to interrupt what we're doing, but if I could have a couple minutes, that might be good.
We'll recess motion for 10 minutes.
Think I just put us in recess. for
Okay,
10
there you
minutes.
go.
Thank you. Time out.
Mayor Pro Tem, we are at our 10-minute mark.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Kane, did you have something? Okay.
And thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. You were so nice. What I'd like to do is take a straw poll to accept David's budget and see where we're at. So I guess those in favor of that could raise their hand. If you want to amend it to with the pilot, that's fine with me.
Appreciate that. Can we keep talking? Hi.
Well, you got about 15 more minutes.
I was talking with Commissioner Burrows and McKiernan right when we were coming back, and I wanted Commissioner Burrows to, if you don't mind, to lay out when we mentioned the 5%, maybe a scenario where we could look at that.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Commissioner Burrows, at-large District 2. Colleagues, if I confused you, it's my apologies to you because that's not what the intent was. The $22 million figure and the $6 million figure that was presented here, those are discretionary fundings that we have an opportunity to address should we choose to do so. But just a 5% cut of those would generate a mill, either on the county or it's 1.4 million that we wouldn't have to take out of reserves if we chose to do that. That was just an example. That is not what I am requesting or mandating we do. There's other ways in which to right-size this budget across the board that we can eliminate programs, we can streamline them, we can do things that the community sees that we are really trying. And then when a tax increase occurs through a valuation and appraisal, they know that we have looked deep into the budget and made some tough decisions. It wasn't to cut 5% off of the entire $466 million budget and lose personnel. The personnel is the easy way out, and we don't want the easy way out. We want to do our homework to ensure it doesn't impact personnel. And so if there was confusion on my part, I'll own that. But my comments have always been budget-oriented efficiencies and effectiveness and how we go about the budget, not the easy way out by eliminating personnel. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Ashley, I know you're here and you wanted to help us with something. I think we've heard sort of a consensus that we don't really want to do a group exercise. But I remain an advocate for some mill levy cut of some form. And yes, I want the pilot relief program. And it seems to me like we had a presentation a long while back that 1% pilot reduction was $1 million. And we've got 750,000.
So how we came up with that $750,000 is that was an increase from the rate.
Correct. I'm sorry. I don't want to misspeak. The 750,000 from the increased pilot collections would pay for the targeted pilot relief program. And I'm good with that. But if my fellow commissioners would rather see, a small reduction in the pilot across the board rather than the targeted pilot program that my committee brought forward it's more money than 750,000 is what I'm driving at. Like a 1% reduction in the pilot for everybody is more costly than $750,000. You all had brought us that information months ago that it was at least $1 million.
I believe it was 1% of the pilot was 3 million.
Okay. I'm going to maintain my support for the targeted pilot relief, I think. And I wrote down I know that Davis, Bynum, Ramirez, and Johnson all said they support that. I'm still looking for at least $1 million. I saw the straw poll answer. Correct. Good. Yeah. Okay. So you're in there too. Okay. Okay. Well, good. So we can have our targeted pilot relief. I think I even heard you say you'd live with it. Anyway. Take the temperature of the room. Where are we? Anybody willing to keep working on $1 million? Okay, Commissioner,
But I think you want to go first? So the people that have contacted me and I've had outside meetings with, and it kind of goes to exactly what Commissioner Burrows was saying, was that we all need to feel the hurt a little bit, right? And I think that 5%, and I totally 100% on board with you. I didn't understand initially that you were not saying that it would affect the pay of our employees, because I'm not for taking any money out of our employees' books at all, not at all. But I do understand, and if we can go back to the slides where it's the 6 million and the $22 million. And I think Commissioner McKiernan is working on it right now on the city one, if we were to take 5% off of this number right here, it's $1.1 million, just 5%, right? And that affects no personnel at all. And I'm thinking my colleague's going to, and so on the county side, if we did the 5% on the county side, that's $1.2 million. Okay, stand by.
Sorry.
I'm getting
There was a key punch error over here.
I'm getting false information.
328.
So 328. So that's the
Zeros are really hard to count.
So I just wanted to put that out there as that's what the numbers that we're looking at, 338,000 and 328, and then 1.1 on the city side. And that would not touch. That's the 5% as we start looking at how we're drilling down into the budget for next year. Thank you.
Commissioner Ramirez, and then Kane.
Thank you. Yes, it's a 5% reduction, but then that's a reduction in service. And the part of that is mowing. Again, I repeat, that's mowing. That's something we all get constant complaints about. Land bank properties, our parks, our right of ways not being maintained. That is a constant complaint we all get. I can tell you I've gotten 3 just this week from constituents. And so we can't even keep up with the current inventory we have. And that also includes parks and recreation. They're doing more than they need to, more than they should. And I at the moment cannot support any mill reduction at the moment. If that hurts me come election time, so be it. I will stand by my decision. I will speak my decision and why I chose to do it. Because I understand we need relief, but I think what we need to work on along with having these tough decisions is specifically what Commissioner McKiernan said. We need to have better delivery of those services. We need to have staff work to make sure that we're being efficient, we're being prompt in providing those services. So that, yes, we may be paying a little bit more, but it shows. that you're getting those services. This is a tough decision, tough discussions. I was telling a constituent the other day, if you look at a picture of me when I first came here and look at me now, completely different. Completely different. And I want to provide relief. I do. I want, and I don't want it to be my words twisted elsewhere and taken out of context out in the community. I want to provide relief, but we are not in the position to do so. If we had more revenue than expenditures and we were a lot better, I would 100% support revenue neutral. I would, because we have more money coming in than we're spending. But as of right now, if we don't accept the budget that our administrator has given us 2 years, we don't know what's gonna happen. I don't want us to play poker with taxpayers' money. I do not want to play poker with taxpayer money. I don't want us to do this and bet that we're gonna be better off in a year. And then that year comes, as has happened in the past, we cut mills, cut too deep, and we had to raise taxes. I don't want that to happen again. So I understand. I again don't want my words twisted out in the community. I do want relief. It needs to happen, but we're not in the position to do it. Can we make those tough decisions? Yeah, we can. But as Commissioner McKiernan said, that discussion should have happened last year at the end of our budget last year. But again, we didn't have the leadership to do so. And so I hear you. I do hear the community. Your concerns, your pleas are not falling on deaf ears. Because Lord knows I get it from my family as well. The complaints. My family, every family, I can guarantee you there's a family gathering. Somebody's gonna bring up property taxes to me. So I know, I hear it all the time. I hear it, but it's just, we're not in the position to. After a couple years, after we work with David and do make those tough decisions, maybe we can. But let him do his job first. Let him do the job we hired him, we approved, we consented him to do. He has the experience with budgets like this. Let him do his job. Thank you.
Commissioner Townsend, and then Kane, and then Davis.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Madam Pro Tem. I agree with accepting the administrator's budget. I think he did a great job. The removal of the red ink or the balancing. It was everything. Last year, I did not vote to accept the major part because of all that red ink and where we had spent it. So to see this as a major step forward, I would go along with the $750,000, but I would leave it at that point. On the way here tonight, I drove by several lots that were weed 6 feet or more. So even if we're talking about a 5% reduction, and then we hear about areas, and I hate this word because that's not it, disinvestment. It's decisions such as this that eat away at our ability to provide those services, to cut those lawns, to take care of vacant property, which we really shouldn't have to do, but that's a fact of life. When we're looking at the city, where would we cut 5% would be a lot. Livable neighborhoods, home repair. You're only looking at 58,000 there. Livable neighborhoods, neighborhood grants. The Willow Gill Center, we just heard for 3 hours last Thursday about the Gill and associated problems, issues, needs, concerned with that. Parks and Rec, lot mowing, street preservation. That still has to be number one with a bullet, although I wouldn't contradict what you said earlier, Commissioner Stites, about tax relief. But as we have all of these meetings about these things, these are some of the things we can least afford to cut this late at night in a budget that to me looks pretty balanced, all things considering. Same thing on the county side, the lot mowing. Do we want to cut cadet programs, WICO sports? Some of those may be more amenable to cutting with not the same impact on what it would look like to drive around in this city, in this county from week to week. So that's why I would not support just across the board diminution of services for that, for these reasons. The big money left the barn several years ago with contractual obligations. Now, we're going to start talking about cutting those, our problem solved. But I don't know that we can do that now. So I favor moving forward with the administrator's budget, with the amendment of the $750,000. And that's all I have to say on the matter.
Thank you. Commissioner Kane and then Davis. Commissioner Davis.
Thank you, sir. I will say this, and this isn't popular, but I just think if you watched the presidential debate last night, we saw a lot of wild, absolutely very interesting things where I think for voters, they want to hear maybe what sounds good, but not necessarily the truth. And we have the privilege of being the local government, where we can be a little bit more honest because we're not working all the way in Washington, D.C. We're working 15 or 5 minutes away or 20 or 30 minutes away in City Hall. And we see these folks, we see our constituents everywhere. We don't necessarily hide from them. I say that because everybody wants to go back. I want to go back to my district and say, I cut property taxes. I had the benefit of doing that this year, because if you all recall, we did reduce the mill by 2 last year. How many people thanked us for it, noticed it, gave us credit for it at all? I mean, yes, it's nice to say it, but what is the real benefit when we are only 46% of the property tax bill and we cannot control what the other 54% does? I'm glad that Dr. Moser came and said, listen, we are going to lower the mill for the college. Quite frankly, that win is ours more than it is theirs because we pressured them to do so. That's our mill reduction, but it is just not, I'm not in favor of cutting any of this because I have a list of probably 50 constituents that are complaining, and that rightfully so, about home repair issues, about flooding, about traffic calming issues, about potholes and what have you. A 5% reduction would be absolutely catastrophic to all of these programs. I agree with Commissioner Townsend. We just heard from Gill. How do we advocate for them to stay with the college and then turn around and say, and you're going to get less funding? It's just, I think we have to swallow the hard pill. The other thing I'll say is this. You all are probably getting the emails from our colleagues across the state in regards to the LAVTR, in regards to the Special Highway Fund and other funds that the state by law should be giving us for this specific purpose of lowering property taxes. And that has not happened. Our efforts should be there working with our state delegation, putting those items at the top of our legislative agenda so that they help us. They can help us by funding LAVTR. They can help us by funding the special highway tax. They can also help us by capping evaluations, which is how we got here to begin with. We can do the mill game all we want, but at the end of the day, if we can cap evaluations specifically for our seniors, right? If we can do that, we can make the difference that we want to. But I fear that we are just putting our efforts in futile endeavors just to say that we've done something, when we know that no one's going to give us credit for it. No one. And then we're going to have to deal with the monetary implications of our actions by more red on our budget sheet. I would love to cut property taxes. I would love to. I just don't see it happening. And to make it very clear, if we were to cut 5%, that still doesn't add up to the mill on the city side or the county side. So we get reduced services and programs that help our constituents, and we don't even get to say we cut a mill. It's just not worth it. I'm a no.
Commissioner Kane and then Burrows. Yield the floor. Okay, Commissioner Burrows.
Thank you. Again, I thought I made it clear. Evidently I didn't. I'm not asking that we do a 5% cut. It was an example of how we get through things. And this conversation has taken a whole different approach. There has been a straw poll in reference to accepting the budget of the administrator. If the votes are there, run it. We all have an opportunity to vote up or down on it. There's things within every budget some of us are going to find complications with that we don't support, that we don't like. We have heard over and over tonight from many of you that we're ready to go. I brought up the 5% as an example, only as an example, not to attack it tonight, not to do anything. It was just on that one little budget portion, and it turned into a 45-minute discussion. But that's okay, because we know where we are as far as accepting this budget from the administrator. If there's the votes to do it, then I think we've found our budget solution. You know, that's all I've got to say. We all have an up or down vote. That's it.
Commissioner Burrows, I appreciate the discussion. I mean, I think that's a good, healthy discussion to have. Commissioner States.
Yep, I appreciate it. And I agree. I mean, let's move her on down the road. But I will tell you, when it comes to mill levy reduction, I'm not looking for a pat on the back, and I'm not looking for somebody in my constituents to say, hey, good job, you lowered our mill. I'm looking at those people to see it when they go and pay their taxes, and when they decide whether they can go buy groceries or buy medication or buy gas to go drive to the store. I'm not looking for a personal accolade. I got voted in to be responsible with their dollars, and that's all I'm trying to do. Thank you.
Thank you. Just a quick comment. We definitely need assistance from our delegation and others in Topeka, because you are so correct. Local ad valorem tax is huge, and we have got to really hone in on that item sooner rather than later with our local delegation and any other elected in Topeka that will listen to us. And there are things that state law precludes us from doing that would be helpful to our constituents right now. You all probably got the emails that I got asking us to do things like, these people can't afford to pay their taxes, so please take them out of the tax sale. The state law will not allow us to do that. I'm not suggesting that necessarily be a state law that's changed, but some creativity around those kinds of issues would be nice. But we don't have that flexibility. We must follow the state statute as it relates to how these properties are appraised and how those taxes are collected. That's just a fact. So would it be nice to have some more flexibility around those issues? It most certainly would. And our time could be very well spent asking for help from the state legislature to give us that kind of flexibility within a community like this where we do know that folks are hurting. Commissioner Kane.
I think we beat this horse to death. I think we've given the administrator direction. So motion to adjourn.
Second Johnson.
Davis second.
All right, we have a motion and a second to adjourn. And I believe that is a roll call.
Roll call Markley,
Aye.
Knights, Davis,
Aye.
Bynum,
Aye.
Burrows, Townsend,
Aye.
McKiernan,
Aye.
Ramirez.
Aye.
Johnson,
Aye.
Kane. Aye. We are adjourned.
Yeah, I do. I think this one's running out of battery. I'm just